What if the faith that saved a 17-year-old in a Sierra Nevada blizzard at midnight was the same faith that carried a $100 billion bank through 9/11 and the 2008 financial crisis and the Silicon Valley Bank panic? For Scott Anderson, it was not a coincidence. That blizzard was his ancestors. That bank was his calling. The voice in the dark was the same one the Pharaoh once asked about when he said, "Where can we find a man in whom the Spirit of God is?" And as I did this episode, my guest, Scott Anderson, constantly reminded me of Joseph of Egypt. Stay with us as Scott shares the voice his ancestor heard in a Sierra Nevada blizzard, the question the Pharaoh asked about Joseph that became his North Star, and what 25 years of steering a $100 billion bank through crisis taught him about building on the right foundation. Welcome to the Why We Believe show, where members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints share their inspiring stories of faith and conversion to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm your host, Nathan Gwilliam. Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of Why We Believe. My guest today has spent more than 3 decades at the center of Utah's economic and civic life. He ran Zions Bank, which was founded by Brigham Young in 1873. He ran that for 25 years as president and CEO, steering it through 9/11, through the 2008 financial crisis, and the Silicon Valley Bank panic of 2023. He's been called Utah's unelected governor, served as chairman of America's Bankers Association, and sat on so many nonprofit and community boards that people have joked he must have clones of himself. He grew up in Salt Lake City, served a mission in Tahiti, studied philosophy at Columbia and international economics at Johns Hopkins. He lived in Tokyo and came home to build something. He now serves as non-executive chairman of Zions Bank. Thanks for joining us today, Scott.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Scott, can you start off by sharing with us something that most people don't know about you?
Well, I love cowboy poetry. In fact, I was just at a cowboy gathering over the weekend. Yeah, I think it's authentic. I think it has good moral values, and it's just a delightful form of entertainment.
My wife's grandfather, his last name is Brimhall, was a cowboy poet. And he and I were very close. I loved him. And he loved to garden, and he loved his cowboy poetry. And his wife felt it was vulgar. And so he would go to his cowboy poetry out in his outbuilding. And he's just an amazing man. So I share a love for cowboy poetry.
I would get along well with him then, because I love it. I think it's just terrific.
Scott, can you share with us your early days, your early journey to become a disciple of Jesus Christ before your mission?
Well, I was lucky in growing up in that I had a great set of parents that taught me how to live and taught me the gospel. I had a grandmother, grandparents on both sides, but my one grandmother lived for a long time and continued to knit her grandchildren together, not only in love, but in the gospel. And I was fortunate that through that, I developed a great faith and belief in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
You ultimately decided you wanted to serve a mission, and you were called to Tahiti. Can you tell us a little bit more about that mission and how it helped you come closer to Christ?
The mission in Tahiti was really, for me, a groundbreaking. It was different than a lot of missions. It was a 3-year mission. It was 2 languages, French and Tahitian. We worked on a lot of the islands in Tahiti, and there are about 2,000 islands. The church actually went there while Joseph Smith was still president of the church, and before they came to Salt Lake. So it was the first foreign mission. The original missionaries stayed there 10 years before they got back, and when they got back, they found that the church had moved to Salt Lake City, and that Joseph Smith had died, and Brigham Young was president of the church. But the people there were extremely faithful. And, they were, in my view, descendants of the people in South America, the children of Lehi that left and went by ship and they believed in God, and it was a wonderful experience for me to participate in their faith.
Can you share with us a story of something specific that happened while you were there in Tahiti, or somebody else that you saw that came closer to Jesus Christ during that time you were serving?
Well, the people there had what I would call simple but deep faith. They weren't worried about the details. They just believed in the existence of God and in His Son Jesus Christ and the Holy Ghost, and they believed that He would come to their aid. And so, when there was a problem, whether there was a storm, whether there was a famine, whether they needed a boat to come to rescue them, they would pray in faith, and things would happen. There were stories of the early missionaries there that would call down the powers of heaven and to wipe out sin, if you will, and then where the missionaries would bless them and that have great prosperity. And so it was a wonderful mission with a great heritage and wonderful people.
So you came back from Tahiti and you ended up studying philosophy at Columbia. Most people who study philosophy often come out questioning everything. Did that shake your faith, or did it actually give you a stronger framework for it?
It didn't shake my faith. I love learning. I love the story of ideas and how people think and how they to see what they believe and how they structure their thought process. And so I just found it fascinating, but it did not in any way cause me to question my belief or any of the tenets in the gospel that I hold so dear.
You described yourself as having been as close to a hippie as you ever could have got. How do you reconcile that version of yourself with who you are today, and how that version of yourself helped you become who you are today?
I had a great experience going to the University of Bologna and to the center that the Johns Hopkins University had there at the University of Bologna. And Bologna is a fabulous city. It has a great heritage. The University of Bologna is the oldest university in the Western world. And Bologna, when I was there, was a communist elected government in Italy, and so it was just a wonderful time. I Bologna also had a very well-known medical school that a lot of Americans went there, and so there's a large crowd of Americans attending the university. I was there with Johns Hopkins and studying international law.
Did that experience helped you come closer to Jesus Christ? Were there any specific moments there that you'd like to share with us?
There are no specific moments that where there is a great burst of light, if you will. But I was active in the church there. It was a small branch. I was active with the missionaries. They came and had dinner and lunch with me often. And so it the church was very much a part of my experience there in Italy and at the university.
You trace your family lineage directly to the earliest Mormon pioneers, an ancestor who was in Brigham Young's Vanguard Company in 1847, and whose Salt Lake home site literally sits beneath Zion's Bank Tower. How has your family history helped to shape who you are today in your testimony of Christ?
I think I've been very blessed with a rich family life here in Utah. In the original band of pioneers that came with Brigham Young in 1847, I have three family members in that, three different family members. So we go back to the beginning of this city and the colonization of Utah, if you will. And I think what that has given me is a great sense of that this is home, that you can look around the community and you can see what your ancestors gave their life to. They were here not to raise a fortune, but to build an empire for God, where people could come and worship God as they would, as they felt they needed to, and where they would be protected, which sounds a lot like the early settlers of America when they came across seeking religious freedom. And I think that has plays a real depth of feeling that my ancestors gave a lot for this faith, and I'm lucky enough to benefit by not only the examples of their faith, but the examples of their hard work in building this city here.
Yeah, standing on the shoulders of giants that came before us.
That's right.
Scott, can you maybe share with a story from one of your ancestors and how they shared faith in their lives?
I can, and this story I've loved. I'm sure it's been exaggerated a bit over the years as it's been retold, but my grandmother's grandfather was a Pony Express rider at the age of 17. And he rode from Nevada, from the border of Utah in a small town called Ipapaw to Elko, Nevada. And then he went over Elko, from Elko into California, into Sacramento. And as he was riding through the Sierra Nevada mountains, he hit a blizzard, and it was at night, and he couldn't see, and he knew he was lost, but he couldn't see. He was tired, he was wet, he was cold, he was freezing. And he said, I'm just going to get off my horse and lay down, go to sleep, wake up, and I will be okay. And a voice came to him and said, if you lay down, you won't wake up. But you have to get off your horse because you'll get lost if you continue to ride in the blizzard. And the voice said, hold your horse's tail with one hand and the bridle with another around a tree, and just walk around that tree for the whole night singing. And that's what he did. The whole night he walked around this tree singing. And then the sun came up, the storm went away, he was alive, he got on his horse, and he rode on to Sacramento and delivered the mail. And it all happened because he was in a state of mind where he heard a voice and he followed through on what it said. And I take that we all have that opportunity to hear a voice when we're in deep trouble. And if we listen and if we follow, we will be blessed.
Wow. And how important is it that we get to a spot that we're actually willing to follow that prompting? I found on my mission that sometimes people could ask those questions about truth and they would get answers, and they usually took action on it. And sometimes there were people that they weren't ready to change their lives. They weren't ready to take action. And often those people didn't get the answers. And I think an important part of being able to hear and have God talk to us is to get ourselves in that state that we're actually willing to act based upon what he tells us.
And I think that is the key, that we hear it, but if we don't act on it, then we're lost. And I think that, at least I've been through this, I think a lot of people fail to act on certain things, and they realize they should have. And they never forget that experience of not acting when they should have. And that has helped them, or at least me, going forward, to remind me when I hear to do.
To never do that again. Yeah. We've heard stories of President Monson telling us of when he made that mistake and how that changed him. Okay, let's talk about Zions Bank for a little bit. You've been there for a long time, and you've grown Zions into something amazing. I think most people aren't aware of how big Zions is and some of the other assets that you hold. I remember when in my early days of entrepreneurship, we actually had some space in Arizona in the National Bank of Arizona building, which I believe is one of your banks. Isn't that
Yes,
correct?
yes, yep.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the size and the magnitude of Zions Bank at the moment?
Yeah, well, Zions Bank was set up about 153 years ago. by Brigham Young. It was set up to help citizens save and become prosperous. And they Brigham Young said that he wanted the bank to be a shining star in the community, enriching the community and empowering the ability of its citizens to grow and thrive. And I've always been guided by that belief and that statement by Brigham Young that this bank is to be a guiding light to the community. It is to help people find the way that they can thrive and to help our communities grow and develop. Zions is almost $100 billion in size. We have branches throughout the Western United States. We operate in different states under different names. So we use the Zions Bank name in Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. So it's a full service community bank, and it was purchased from the church in 1960, and it's a publicly listed company.
Yeah. So some of those other names that you operate under, Amici Bank of Texas, am I saying that right?
Amici Bank in Texas,
Amici.
the
Okay.
National Bank of Arizona in Arizona, Nevada State Bank in Nevada, California Bank and Trust in California, Commerce Bank of Oregon in Oregon, Commerce Bank of Washington, Vectra Bank in Colorado, and Continental Bank in New Mexico.
Yeah. And for the audience, I want to illustrate um, how much the bank has grown since he's been there. When Scott joined in 1991, Zions only had 78 branches and $3.2 billion in assets. It now has 416 branches and like Scott said, almost $100 billion in assets. That's truly staggering how much growth Zions has seen while you've been there. That's roughly a 27 times increase in assets over your 33-year tenure.
And I should note that that includes all of Zions Bank Corporation. Zions Bank is the lead bank, and Zions Bank is part of that Zions Bank charter.
So to what do you credit that ridiculous amount of success?
Well, I think it's going back and remembering the vision that Brigham Young had for this bank when he established it, that it should be a pillar of the community. It should be a light in the community. And he prophesied that it would have branches throughout the territory of Deseret. And if you go back and look at the original territory of Deseret, it stretched from Utah down into Arizona, Nevada, and California. It went down to San Diego and back up. And so, we are now in all of those areas with branches. And I think, it's the goal is to create an environment in the neighborhoods and communities that we operate in where we have an economy where everyone truly has an opportunity to thrive. And that means we are out there with people, we're out there with organizations, we're working together to solve creatively the problems that we face. And our goal is to create value for our customers and our communities, and obviously of our shareholders that keep us in business.
Banking sometimes is an industry where it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to keep your ethics and stand for what you believe in. How have you been able to do this over your decades within this industry?
I actually think that the banking is a business that's based on trust. And without trust, it doesn't work. You trust that if you give me money when you need it, I'll give it back to you. I trust that if I make you a loan, you'll pay it back, and I'll have that money to lend out again. And so I think to operate well in banking, you have to have an organization that's full of integrity, that has faith in people, and that is operating honestly in all endeavors, honestly with the clients, honestly with the regulators, honestly with the communities in which we live and work. And so I think banking It's really an easy place to live and an easy place to practice your religion because you have to have those same values to make banking successful.
Friday before 9/11, I was in the World Trade Center, and then it obviously collapsed the following Tuesday, and it put the financial markets in the United States in a horrible position. Can you tell me what that did to you and how Zion's weathered that storm?
It goes back to that wonderful parable, I should say, of building your house on a rock. And if you do, and if the winds blow, the rock holds the building solid and it doesn't sink or collapse. And so when all of that happened, I knew that the foundation of Zion's Bank was solid and secure. And we then didn't have to worry about the bank collapsing. We just need to worry about solving the problems that were around us and helping our customers navigate through those troubling times. And I think that in those times we were blessed by the Lord to operate in a manner that in fact helped the community pull out of that situation and pull out of the Great Recession of 2008 and pull out of the COVID shutdown. And I think that's what's amazing that the Lord is there to bless those who serve Him and believe in Him and call upon His name for help.
Of those crises of 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, COVID, and even the 2023 Silicon Valley Bank crisis, which of those tested you the most personally, not institutionally, but you?
Through it all, I mean, there was always stress and pressure that you would do the right thing. But like I said, I knew that the foundation of the bank was solid, and when you know that it's solid, you don't worry, and you just have to focus on the problems that are before you, knowing that you can solve them and you can work through them, and that all will be well. And I think that's a good way to look at life and a good way to build a life and I think it goes back to the truth in that parable that if you want a good life, you build on a rock, you build on a solid foundation, which the gospel gives you. If you don't care about it and you build on sand, you may have a bigger house, but if something happens, it collapses. And I think, just stay in tune with those principles makes a lot of sense. And it did for me.
Yeah. Okay. So let's follow this analogy through. You built a bank on solid principles, and you've been through some ridiculously difficult and challenging times as a business, and you came out the other side having grown the business 27 times, 2,700%
Yeah.
during your time there. Let's bring that analogy through to the family. What can we learn from how you kept the bank safe, building that foundation that we can learn in our families and learn in our personal lives to build on that foundation of Jesus Christ specifically to weather our metaphorical challenges that we will all go through?
I think the basic principle is, and we see it throughout the Old Testament, we see it throughout the Book of Mormon, that if you believe in God, if He is your rock and your foundation, and if you remember Him, and if you take upon you His name and keep His commandments, then things will go well. You may have troubles, you may have sorrows, you may have mishaps, but you're full of faith and you know you are blessed. And we've seen that in the Old Testament. We've seen it in the Book of Mormon. I've seen it in my banking career, and you know that all is well because in the end, God is with you.
In the end, it all is well because God is with you. That we've paid the price, we've done the part. That when the storms come, when the rains are beating down on us, we know that all can be well because God is with us.
Yep.
Doesn't mean everything will be easy. Just means we have God's help to get through it. We don't have to do it ourselves. The scariest thing for me, the scariest place for me to be is if there's a time when I know I don't have God with me, because I know I can't do it myself. I know the only way I'll ever get through it is with his help.
But I think and I agree with that, but I think the truth that I found, and again, if you go to the Old Testament, which I'm reading now, and again, the Book of Mormon, uh, people, they believe in God, they follow his commandments, they prosper, they fall away, they repent, they believe, and they prosper, and they receive his blessings. And I think that ability of God to be long suffering, to love his children, and to accept their repentance and then to bless them again and again is what gives me great confidence in life, in being able to go forward. Because if you fall, if you stumble, if you sin, you can seek God's help, and he is there with you. He won't abandon you.
Yeah, that's right. We've talked about the business side of you a lot. Let's come back to the spiritual side of Scott Anderson. Is there a moment in your life when you remember first believing, hey, this is really true?
Like I said, I was lucky in that I had a great upbringing with parents that were true believers, with grandparents that were true believers, with ancestors that had given everything they had to follow God and to build His kingdom here on the earth. And so I always had a belief in the gospel. I've always had a belief in prayer. I've always known that God was there, and that he was there to help me succeed. And so I can't point to any event where I had a miraculous conversion, or I saw a vision, or heard a voice, but I felt and have felt continually that God is there watching out for me and for all of his sons and daughters here on earth.
Yeah, definitely. Is there a time in your life where you've been through a particularly difficult challenge that God helped you get through?
I think the thing that is great about faith is that it strengthens you when you need to be strengthened, and the Holy Ghost comes and gives you insight into actions that should be taken. And if you follow those, you are blessed. One of my favorite scriptures, and one of the examples that I have looked to often in the scriptures, is Joseph of old, who was sold into Egypt. Here was a young man that we're told believed in God. He was disliked by his brothers, but loved by his father. He was sold into slavery into Egypt. Uh, but when you read it about his story, it said the Lord was with him, and Potiphar, who bought him, noticed that whatever Joseph did, it prospered because God was with him, and so his household prospered, and Potiphar put him over his household. Then he threw him into prison, and the Lord was with Joseph in prison, and he prospered. And then he was brought out and he interpreted the Pharaoh's dream. And then it said, the Pharaoh said something that has stayed with me forever, where he said, and if you remember the story, Joseph explained the dream and said, I'd encourage you to find someone who can help you during the good times to prepare for the 7 bad years. And the Pharaoh said, where can we find such a man as this, in whom the Spirit of God is? And I think that what that tells me, and what has been my desire and hope throughout these years, I think it should be all of us, that we can live in such a way that we prosper because God is with us, and that people notice us because God is with us, and that where we may not always be successful, we may end up in prison like Joseph did. We may be sold into slavery like Joseph did, but we prosper because God is with us, because we are with God. And I think that has helped me throughout all my life, through trials, through tribulations, through successes. You know that you are where you are. You're blessed by God, and He deserves the credit and the glory for whatever you have received.
Wow. What an amazing parallel to the story you've just told us of your life, right? You look at Joseph who went through these terrible situations with the betrayal from his brothers and this time in Egypt and Potiphar's wife and all of that, but God was with him. And Pharaoh's or Potiphar's house and Egypt prospered because God was with him. And he prepared for the famine that came, and then even though they went through 7 years of famine, they prospered because God was with them. And you look at the story that you just told us, where you took Zions through these horrible times, through 9/11 and through the 2008 financial crisis and through Silicon Valley Bank and all of that, but it survived because you prepared and because you strive to have God with you. What an amazing opportunity for Zion's Bank to have had someone that has strived to have God with them, that has strived to be prepared. And Zion's and its shareholders are in such a better place because they had a man like Scott Anderson in that role during those times. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we had a lot of good people, and we have a lot of good people, and continue to have a lot of good people that drive this bank. And I think that they do believe in God, and they believe in the principles of honesty and integrity, and doing good to their fellow men and women. And I think that makes a difference in how you run a business. It makes a difference where your goals are to create value instead of creating profit, where you are there to help the community grow instead of to enrich yourself. And you're there to take care of your shareholders who have uh, shared their wealth with you so that you could build the bank. And I think it's a different philosophy, but it's one that came up from the founder.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Scott, in conclusion, why do you believe?
Because I've always known that it's true, and it gives me what I want. It holds the possibility of me to become exalted. That's the whole goal of this life. That's my whole goal, and I believe because I believe it's true.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. And when you talk about being exalted, you talk about being able to live with God someday and even live like God someday. Um, can you tell me who Jesus Christ is to you?
The marvelous thing about that, and how I would answer that question, obviously, he's my Savior and my Lord and my Redeemer, but he's also my brother and he's my friend. And I love those scriptures where they talk about he's our friend and he looks to us. He's our shepherd and we're his sheep. He knows us. And that makes it a very personable and close knit relationship.
Well, Scott, I'm going to have to jump on my other call. I'm so sorry for
No, this
rushing
is
this.
great. I've enjoyed being with you, and thank you for this opportunity.
And here are my key takeaways from this episode. Number one, a life built on God as its rock weathers any crisis without fear of collapse. Number two, God often prepares us years in advance for assignments we cannot yet see coming. Number three, the moment we stop listening to the voice is the moment we feel most lost. Number four, whatever prosperity comes through following God belongs to God, not to us. And finally, simple, unquestioning faith can outlast any intellectual argument against it. If Scott's story has helped lift your faith, please take a moment to help share it. You can leave a review and rating for Why We Believe and add a comment telling us which part of Scott's journey resonated most with you so it can help other people to find these episodes. And don't forget to visit whywebelieve.com, where you can download your free guide with 13 strategies to increase faith in Jesus Christ to support you as you strengthen your own testimony.